been nearly a year since the original official 2-year Splatoon 3 update cycle completed, which ended with the transcendent experience that was the Grand Fest. And while the Grand Fest was a high I will never reach again, I haven't touched Splatoon 3 since. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about Splatoon 3 because I keep asking myself the same question I've been asking since the very first month of the game's life. Why was Splatoon 3 like that? Or to be specific, why did Nintendo treat Splatoon 3 like that? Now, if you're someone who responded to that with, "What are you talking about? Splatoon 3 is a great game," I would agree. It's a fantastic game. Now. But if you're someone who could immediately relate to what I was vaguely alluding to, well, you're a Splatoon fan. Before we start, just so you know what you're getting into here, this video is essentially one huge vent covering my grievances with how Splatoon 3 was handled by Nintendo. It's going to cover both genuine criticism and the tiniest of subjective nitpicks, but I've tried to keep everything in this video as objective as possible, as in, even if I talk about something that seems very opinionated, I try to justify why I think it's an actual problem. Whether I'm able to achieve that or not is up to you. I put what I think were the real, most genuinely damaging problems at the beginning of the video, and then I break down the categories into the biggest features of Splatoon 3. It's a long one, but don't worry, I've labeled all the categories so you can skip around as you please. Now that you know what this video is, I want to make one thing very clear. I love Splatoon. And I love Splatoon 3. If I did not love the Splatoon franchise as much as I do, I would not have gotten so frustrated with how Nintendo handled Splatoon 3 that I made this video going over all my grievances with it. Let me repeat. If I did not love Splatoon 3, I wouldn't have had the passion to make this video. I am not criticizing this game because I don't like it. I'm criticizing it because I love it and I know it could have been so much more. Okay? Okay. Let's go.
They don't even have shortcuts.
Now, I know you want to get into the nitty-gritty, but I have some important background information about myself that you need to know so you can understand where I'm coming from with a lot of these points. First things first, I am a casual Splatoon player. What I mean by this is that I do not play competitively, and what I mean by competitively is in offline or online official tournaments with a team. I am not talking about the in-game ranked mode. Competitive and ranked Splatoon are two different things, and from now on I will refer to competitive as comp. When I used to play Splatoon more back in Splatoon 2, I would primarily play the ranked mode and only play Turf War during Splatfest. I of course also played Salmon Run, but I'll mostly be talking about the PvP game modes in this video. I started playing Splatoon during Splatoon 2 and have no experience with playing Splatoon 1. That's a quick snapshot of me as a Splatoon player. Now I want to go over what I think was the biggest and most damaging mistake of Splatoon 3, the maps.
What's going on in here? Huh? Why is everything all tiny?
It is unanimously agreed on in the Splatoon community that the bad maps and bad update cycles were the two giant killer bears in the room when discussing Splatoon 3's problems, and I struggled to decide which one was worse, but I believe it comes down to you and how you play Splatoon. I eventually landed on the maps being my number one because I had a huge realization when brainstorming this video. The maps in Splatoon 3 were designed in a way that made gameplay inherently more competitive. I am not referring to comp. I am referring to the adjective competitive. You got that? Now let me set the scene. When Splatoon 3 was released, I had two roommates, my partner and my sister, and we all love Splatoon. Me and my partner have played Splatoon the most and are at a pretty similar skill level and play a lot of games in general. I just engage with Splatoon and any related media more. My sister, however, is the most casual of casuals. She loves Splatoon, but doesn't really like to play fast-paced shooters. She rarely plays the actual game, and when she does, it's only Turf War during the fests, and the occasional Salmon Run. we all started playing around the same time, shortly before the Octo expansion came out. Despite the differences in how we approach Splatoon, we all truly love the series and completely engage with everything it has to offer with the world, the characters, the visuals, and the music. Oh my god, the music! So imagine our excitement when the Test Fest was announced and we all get to play a brand new Splatoon game together. We started as soon as the game would let us, and we dedicated our whole day to it. Looking back at that day, I remember now something had happened that I didn't think much of then. Remember how I mentioned that my sister is a super casual Splatoon player? There's nothing wrong with this. In fact, it showcases one of the best qualities of Splatoon's inking system, where anyone, no matter how old, young, good, or bad, can start playing in a game of Turf War and directly contribute to winning the game. Except, she couldn't really do this anymore. At least, not like how she could in Splatoon 2. For those of you that may not know, Splatoon 3 was, and still kinda is, infamous for having tiny hallway maps. Not only is it just bad, lazy map design, but Splatoon 2 before this had a huge expanse of wildly varying maps. And sure, that variety includes some small, simple maps, but it wasn't the majority. These are the maps that Splatoon 3 launched with. Compare these to some of Splatoon 2's most iconic maps. You see the problem? Players immediately noticed the prevalence of these Tetris piece-looking first drafts of PvP maps. Chargers were unstoppable, teams would wipe the other and take over the entire map due to how small it was. Spawn camping was more prevalent than ever, even though they specifically implemented the choose your own spawn location mechanic. But I've realized that these maps caused even more problems than we originally thought. Remember a couple paragraphs ago when I mentioned that something happened with my sister when we were playing the Test Fest? After a couple hours of playing, my sister said something along the lines of, "I need to use a different weapon. I keep getting killed." Like I said, I didn't really make a big deal of it at the time, but I do remember thinking that it was weird. My sister loves using the roller. It's so easy and fun for her to just glide around putting down paint. It's how she liked to play. But the important thing to note is that she hates to fight. She uses the roller because she wants to run around the map and paint. She does not like to fight with other players and actively avoids it by staying on her side of the map and running away. But now, suddenly in Splatoon 3, she feels like she needs to use a different weapon because she keeps getting run down and killed. Whether you're new to Splatoon or a seasoned veteran, you may be thinking, so what? What does this have to do with the maps? Well, I had a realization. This never happened in Splatoon 2. I'm not saying that she never got killed in Splatoon 2, of course she did. No, what I'm saying is that it never happened at such a frequency where my sister, the super casual roller player, got fed up with it enough where she felt like she needed to change how she likes to play the game. Do you see where I'm going with this? Let's take a look at those maps from Splatoon 2. These maps were huge and had tons of ways you could choose to go. A player like her had plenty of space to just run around and ink. Even though she wasn't participating in the fights, she was still actively helping the team. Now let's go back to those Splatoon 3 maps. The space of which the players have has been cut in at least half, if not more in some cases. Now a player like her will have a lot less to work with in the backline until she's forced to move forward for fresh ground. On the other hand, the enemy also has less to work with. If your team loses the mid-fight, then at least one of the enemy players will push forward and hey wow, look at that, they're already in your backline. Do you understand now what I mean when I say that these maps inherently make the game more competitive? Players are forced into more fights because there is simply not enough room to do otherwise. Splatoon is a casual game first and a competitive game second. One of the best things any PvP game can do is be accessible and fun for newcomers while also having the depth for those who want to push the competitive aspects to the limit. Nintendo is actually great at this when looking at their first-party games. I mean, that's the reason Mario and Pokemon are some of the biggest names in the world. It's because anyone can play them and have a good time. Splatoon's inking system was nothing less than revolutionary. They managed to create a shooter, a genre which is often considered a hardcore competitive one, and made it to where anyone can pick it up, choose a weapon they think looks cool, and have success with it. I firmly believe Splatoon 3 was actively hindering the casual audience with these tiny maps. What's the fun of throwing ink everywhere if you barely have space to throw it? The only reason I was able to come to this conclusion is because I was able to see the perspective firsthand. My sister is a full-grown adult who just doesn't usually play games like Splatoon. But if she felt like this, imagine all the new or younger players trying Splatoon for the first time. As I mentioned before, Splatoon is a game great for everyone, but in Splatoon 3, with these tiny maps, newcomers and less skilled players are constantly getting destroyed by returning players, and those returning players are arriving fresh off of Splatoon 2's varied maps only to be met with incredibly limiting map design. With its colorful visuals and virtually non-existent marketing in the West, many people here think of Splatoon as just a game for kids because they don't know any better. These copy and pasted maps are what people who don't play Splatoon think Splatoon is. I have a little more to talk about on the maps regarding Turf War, but I'll leave that to the Splatfest section so we can move on from the maps for now. First off, real quick about the battle passes. They added goddamn battle passes to Splatoon 3. Okay, this on its own isn't a big deal, except they are such a huge grind, you think that the template came straight from a pay-to-win mobile game, but it's a first-party Nintendo game, and I guess they just assumed you'd be cool with abandoning all your other responsibilities and hobbies to have enough time to complete these things because you're a Splatoon player now and nothing else. Oh, and don't forget the FOMO, gotta get that in there. Huh? You thought you'd be able to just earn the rewards at your own leisure? No, silly! You get 3 months, and then it's bye-bye to those old rewards, and hello new Battle Pass. What? The rewards you missed? Well, don't worry, months later and we've added them to our gacha system, so now you can gamble for those rewards. Anyway, the update cycle's right. What was Nintendo thinking? To be clear, the 3-month structure was fine. We knew when updates were coming, and it was usually treated as a big deal. No, the problem that I and a lot of other players had with the updates was the baffling inconsistency of content that came from those updates, and I specifically want to talk about the weapons. I'm going to give some context for those who don't know or don't remember. At the beginning of Splatoon 3, every weapon had a single kit. By the end of Splatoon 3, we got some new weapons, and every weapon ended with 2 kits. We began with 1 kit each, and never even got 3rd kits. I know some of you are thinking, but Splatoon 2 started with hardly anything and built up a number of kits over its 2-year run. Right, yeah, I get that we can't just start with everything. So it only makes sense for Splatoon 3 to also start with nothing.
No?
Splatoon 2 was the second game ever in a brand new series. They were still trying to figure everything out. This is Splatoon 3, okay? This is arguably the first game where they should have had all their marbles sorted for what Splatoon is and how they should present it. I, as a player, should not just expect to start with less in the sequel. When Splatoon 3 started, we had 1 kit for every weapon type that was in Splatoon 2. But we should have, at bare minimum, started with 2 kits per weapon. You know why? Because we only got new kits every 3 months, and it was totally random which weapons got new kits. Real quick for anyone that doesn't play Splatoon, each weapon comes with a kit. Kit refers to the combination of special and sub-weapons you could use while wielding that main weapon. The subs are very important, but the specials can completely change how you play the game because they are mostly all completely distinct from each other. So if you start Splatoon 3 at launch and your favorite weapon has a new special you don't like, or you really enjoy that returning special but it's only on a couple weapons you don't play, well, guess you'll just have to play something else. That or you could wait for a new kit to be added. Yeah, we don't know what weapons are getting new kits until the update, so you'll only have to wait a minimum of 3 months or a maximum of 2 years. It's not hard to imagine how these types of updates would negatively affect any type of player, but I can give you a specific example and explain how it affected my enjoyment of the game. I'm pretty picky when it comes to Splatoon weapons, all things considered, but one of the best things about Splatoon is the vast variety of weapons to choose from with tons of different playstyles. So at the beginning of Splatoon 3, I cycled through a bunch of weapons before settling on one to focus on as I started playing ranked. I decided to use the Squiffer, which is a favorite of mine. But as we established, for the first 3 months of Splatoon 3, every weapon only had 1 kit, and unfortunately the only Squiffer available had a special I didn't really like. the Big Bubbler. For those of you who don't know Splatoon, you've probably already put together that specials are a big special action you can do. They can be damage-based, defense-based, ink-based, or even movement-based. Instead of each weapon having their own special, there are set specials and subs, and they're assigned to different weapons by the Nintendo overlords. You cannot choose which special you want to use with what weapon. Now back to the bubble. The Big Bubbler is simply a big shield that spawns around you and you can freely travel in and out of it. There's nothing wrong with the special, I just don't like using it. Also, the Squiffer is a medium-range sniper with a fast charge that can one-shot kill, so most of the time a Squiffer player is going to want to be constantly on the move, and Bubble seems like a really bad choice for this weapon, but that's besides the point. My point is, I didn't enjoy using this Squiffer. So, my excitement for Splatoon 3 is at an all-time high. We played the preview fest for hours and hours, and I loved every minute of it, and I'm eagerly awaiting launch day. As soon as I get home from work and settle in, it's on. I spent the first weekend playing through the story and loved it, but now it's time to get serious with Ranked. This is the start of a brand new Splatoon generation, and I was planning on this being my main game from now on. They even made the rank mode a lot better with players having only one overall rank instead of individual ranks for each game mode. I look at the maps, decide on a weapon, and go. I keep playing and switching weapons every so often as I find my groove, and I finally decide that I'm in a Squiffer mood and... well, I guess I only have the one choice. It has the bubble, which I don't like, but I want to use the Squiffer, so it'll have to do. And, you know, I do have fun for a good while. Even if I don't use the bubble to protect myself, I can still throw it down for teammates to safely jump in, plus it's really good on tower control. But as time goes on, I notice more and more how the bubble is really hindering my enjoyment. This special is 1/3 of my entire kit, and it's not like a sub where you can mostly just ignore it. Specials are supposed to be game changers and are designed to force people to play the game differently when they're used. Also, Splatoon is a very fast-paced series. You kill fast, you die fast, you get special fast, and the games are only 3 to 5 minutes long. So you're probably going to be getting a lot of specials. I tried switching to different chargers, but I wanted the mobility of the Squiffer. Okay, well how about non-charger weapons? Sure, I do like a lot of the other weapons overall, but I tend to go through weapon phases. Whenever I play Splatoon, I feel out the weapon I want to use and stick with it until I'm tired of it. So I go back to the bubble Squiffer and just deal with it. This didn't last long though. For the first month, I would go back and forth from Ranked to Salmon Run, but I slowly just stopped playing Ranked altogether. I wasn't happy with the limited kits and the novelty of the new maps had worn off, so now they were just frustrating to play on. Eventually, Splatoon 3 just kinda teetered off for me. I still loved it and thought about it all the time, but I felt like I didn't have much to do anymore. I 100%ed the story mode, I don't play Tier 4 outside of Fests, I didn't want to play Ranked if I didn't have a weapon I loved, and I usually only play Salmon Run when I had at least one other person to play with. I had zero desire to grind the Battlepass because I learned pretty quick that at the speed at which you complete it, they expect you to play Splatoon 3 and nothing else, so I knew I wasn't even going to be able to finish it if I tried. Also, Salmon Run has its own grinding hell, so... guess I'll just put Splatoon 3 down and wait for the next update then. 3 months later, and the first major update came to Splatoon 3, and oh man, it was exciting. It had 3 completely new weapons and a bunch of new kits, and oh, no new Squiffer. I tried out a couple of the new weapons and they were cool, but I wasn't taken in by any of them. So back to waiting, I guess. I'll play the Splatfests, but then just go back to waiting for the next update after those were done. I assume that a lot of you other casual players went through a very similar pattern. Even if some of you just kept playing, all types of Splatoon players went through the same cycle of running out of things to do. Or at least, running out of things that we wanted to do. You see, the maps in the bare-bones state the game launched in would often cascade with each other to create just a meandering experience. Have a weapon you really like? Well, you only have one choice. Take it to these maps that all have the same cramped feeling. Spawn in and run in a straight line to the objective, die in the mid-fight, then spawn in where an enemy has already pushed up to your base. Let your teammates take care of them so you can try to push forward, but get killed as you're getting to mid because their charger can snipe you safely from their side. Want to flank the charger? Too bad, there are only 2 directions you can come from at them and they can see you the whole way. If I have to play on these block piece maps and I can't even use a weapon I love, then why keep playing? I mean, I know there's going to be a big update every 3 months, so I'll just stop for now and wait for that. Update comes around and it doesn't add you kit you like? Guess I'll just wait for the next update. You watch the trailer they drop for the next season, don't see the kit you want, then you go on with your day. Maybe next update. You know, at some point I thought about trying the Bamboozler. I had a small phase with it in Splatoon 2, but could never really dedicate myself to it with its high skill floor. But maybe now is the time. I want to play Splatoon 3, and it's the most similar to Squiffer, so yeah, why not? Alright, let me just find the Bamboo...
Nintendo,
What?
where's the Bamboozler?
Goes right there. See, I drew it with a magic marker.
That's right, Bamboozler did not get its second kit until the final season of Splatoon 3, aka 2 years later. Oh, and guess what? It wasn't the only one. The Range Blaster and Hydro Splatling also got their second kit in that same final season. 3 weapons only had one kit for 2 years. This is not just bewildering, it is unacceptable. I do not care if these are considered less popular weapons. Having to wait 2 full years for a second kit of any weapon is asinine. Anyway, I think we should quickly go through those updates now. We'll ignore the brand new weapons and instead just look at the new kits for the weapons already in the game. Just a heads up, for a purpose of a point I'm going to make later, I'm going to count dualies as shooters even though they are labeled as their own weapon class because I believe dualies are just a subcategory of shooters as they are all auto shooters that just have the shared mechanic of a little dodge. Chill Season 2022. Shooter, Roller, Shooter, 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 Brush, Blaster, Bucket, Shooter, Splatling. Fresh Season 2023. Shooter, Blaster, Shooter, Roller, Shooter, 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 Blaster, Bucket, Charger. Sizzle Season 2023. Brella, Shooter, Shooter, Splatling, Shooter, Blaster, Splatana, Shooter, Roller. Drizzle Season 2023. Roller, Charger, Bucket, Bucket, Splatling, Brella, Brush, Stringer. Chill Season 2023. Shooter, Charger, Shooter, Brella, Blaster, Blaster, Brush, Stringer, Splatana. Fresh Season 2024. Shooter, Charger, Bucket, Bucket, Roller, Shooter, Splatling, Charger. Sizzle Season 2024. Charger, Shooter, Splatling, Blaster, Splatling, Brella. As you can see, what types of weapons got kits in these updates was all over the place, and the shooters were clearly favored early on. So, it's time. Seasoned Splatoon players may know what's coming next. Let's talk about Splatoon and shooter bias.
Okay, Patrick, this is a very delicate situation and must be treated with great care and sensitivity.
Gotcha.
Run, everybody, run! Monster!
Look, I'm not going to argue whether or not shooter bias exists in Splatoon. Splatoon clearly has a shooter bias. I think that's obvious. No, the question the players should be asking is whether or not they think shooter bias is good for the game. Or, you know, if they personally like it or not. Let's start with if I think that's good for the game. I personally don't like to use shooters, but I don't think they're bad for the game. I recognize that they are both the easiest to design and easiest for new players to pick up and succeed with. I think shooters are a good and necessary part of the game, and it makes sense for there to be more of them than any other weapon type. Now that that's out of the way, I want to first address the common sentiment of, but it's a shooter game, as an argument for the shooter bias. While I agree Splatoon does fall within the shooter genre, I would argue it's because there's not really a better genre label for Splatoon. There's also the issue of what most people think of what a shooter is. They probably first think of realistic military simulators like Call of Duty or Battlefield, or more colorful games like Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch. Either way, if you say shooter, Splatoon isn't going to be the first game that comes to mind for most. I think the main reason for this is the ink mechanic. See, most shooters have the same fundamental mechanics which lead to winning the game, killing other players, and completing an objective. Splatoon has these two, except it has the third mechanic of ink, and it's not just a fun side gimmick. It's as fundamental to the gameplay as the other two. Killing or splatting other players and inking the map are both directly connected to the weapons. Objectives are necessary to win the game, but there are several different types which depend on the player playing in a way to fulfill them. Therefore, every weapon is typically designed to either be better at splatting or inking. All weapons can splat, and all weapons can ink, but it's usually pretty clear which each weapon is intended to be better for. But of course, they've released some in-betweeners and all-arounders. My point is, those who don't know Splatoon may think that any non-gun-like weapons aren't as good, but that's just simply not true. Inking is just as important as splatting. Also, there's just the fact that there are plenty of non-shooters designed to be splatters. Yes, if you look at all the weapons on paper, Splatoon has a shooter bias. And as I established before, I think this is reasonable and has never been an actual problem in Splatoon because even though there are more shooters than any other class, there are still a lot of other weapons to choose from that aren't shooters. The problem with Splatoon 3 wasn't the overall shooter bias, it was the shooter bias in the updates. The first few seasons added more shooters than anything else. Now you could argue that the shooter class is the biggest and therefore has more weapons to give kits, but here's the kicker. I don't think longtime Splatoon players realize or remember how similar a lot of the shooters are to a new player. I know because that was me when I first started playing Splatoon. Splattershot versus the NZAT versus Splash, all mid-range automatic shooters. Aerospray versus Junior versus Sploosh, all short-range good painters. A lot of the dualies feel very similar to me. Now, this fact isn't necessarily good or bad. If anything, newer players who don't know the difference essentially just have more kits to choose from between the similar weapons. But that's the thing. All the other weapons don't have so many options. The other weapon types tend to stick to a typical structure. A short, mid, and long range version, plus one or two versions that have their own gimmick. So there is a clear difference between all of these. If you want to play a roller, you can choose a playstyle and then choose the corresponding roller. But from there, you just get whatever special the weapon is assigned with, whether or not you want to use it. This is why Splatoon has the kit system, so people who play the same weapon can still be playing in completely different ways based around their special. If you only have one kit per weapon, then you are very limited to how you can play that weapon. So, let's bring it back to the updates. I already established that the seasonal updates were very lopsided when giving new weapon kits and were overall inconsistent. But I believe the real root of the issue and our frustrations was the fact that Splatoon 3 started with only one kit per weapon. It should have absolutely 100% launched with 2 kits per weapon. Then we would get third kits slowly released in the seasonal updates. Not only would we have had twice as many weapons to play in a game that launched in a very limited state for no reason, but it would have given all the new players 2 chances to love each weapon. Maybe they loved the slow, burst-style gameplay of the Explosher, but they didn't have the game knowledge to stay alive long enough with such a slow weapon. Well, they maybe could instead have used the custom Explosher with its defensive splash wall and panic special triple splashdown in a pinch. Then when they get better, they'll have the confidence to try to make the other Explosher work. Except, there was only the one Explosher at launch, and they just kept dying and weren't having fun, but it was the only option. So instead of trying out another version, they instead think, well, I guess I'm not good with this weapon, and move on from it entirely. I know some people who don't play Splatoon may be thinking, why don't they just use a different slosher? I established before that all weapon types at least have a short, mid, and long range version, so that makes sense. But if you don't play Splatoon, you don't know how vastly different all these weapons feel. It's likely that any player may just like one weapon from a type group, and that's it. They aren't just the same weapons with different ranges. They have different wind-up and cooldown times. They all have different speeds, and they have different power and ink outputs. If a player likes the fast-paced gameplay of the Carbon Roller, they can't just switch it with the base roller and get the same gameplay experience. Even though there are tons of different weapons in Splatoon, you cannot choose the special or sub that comes with them. They are completely predetermined, and they will greatly change how you can play with that weapon. So, I can hear some Nintendo suck-ups saying things like, it's the beginning of the game, there's already so many weapons, we know more kits will be added, isn't that enough? No! Starting with only one kit per weapon is not enough, as I just explained. But you also seem to be forgetting that this is Splatoon 3. Splatoon 1 was not just a brand new IP from Nintendo, but a brand new kind of shooter. After its success, Splatoon 2 had enough wiggle room to test out new concepts and gameplay and really iron out what Splatoon's identity would be. Splatoon 3 was supposed to be the grand conglomeration of everything Splat 1 and 2 gave us. Not only that, but it was launched towards the middle of the Switch's life, way after it was proven a success and the install base was huge. Splatoon 2 was an early title, and there was a lot of hype for the Switch as a brand new hybrid console. By the time Splatoon 3 was announced, the Switch was a phenomenon and everyone had one, even those who weren't Nintendo fans. So, this was Splatoon's big chance to really become mainstream. It had all the experience from the first two games. It had the massive install base for the Switch, it had the hype build up from the test fest where people could try out Splatoon for free, and then it launched in a barren state so Nintendo could dish out a lazy update every 3 months with content that should have already been in the game. Instead of giving us everything we had in Splatoon 2 and building on top of that, Nintendo just removed content and fed it back to us claiming it as new. And yes, in retrospect, I do think the seasons were very lazy because the kits were the main content of each seasonal update. We did get brand new weapons or specials with each update, but while they were very exciting, they were the smaller component. The very first season had 3 new weapons and 10 kits. From there on, we either got 2 new weapons or specials with 8 to 12 kits with each new season. So we did get a good amount of new weapons, but most of them were underwhelming, in my opinion. More on that later. And because we only started with 1 kit per weapon, everyone was just as desperate to see their favorite weapons getting another kit as they were to see brand new weapons. You may think I'm fixating on the fact that Splatoon 3 should have started with 2 kits per weapon, but 1. There is no excuse for Nintendo to remove content only to add it back in later and label it as new. 2. Splatoon 2 already gave us 3rd kits towards the end of the game. It wasn't for every single weapon, but it set a precedent that they were willing to put more kits in the game for every weapon. And 3. We never even got 3rd kits in Splatoon 3. In the game that loved to play around with having triplets with 3 idols, 3 fest choices, 3 plazas, 3 Salmon Run buses, 3 idol groups, the 3 team Tricolor battles, but when it comes to 3rd kits, something we had in the previous game, they draw the line? Do you understand how absurd that is? Before I move on to the new weapons and specials, I need to reiterate the fact that Splatoon 3 started with 1 kit per weapon. So if you wanted a new kit for your favorite weapon, you would have to wait a minimum of 3 months and then just hope your weapon would be included in the dice roll of options they gave us. If it wasn't, repeat. A lot of people talked about how they put down Splatoon 3 after the first month, and I believe this is one of the biggest reasons. Players like me who are waiting for the second kit for a weapon would watch the trailer, not see the weapon I wanted, play the new update for a few hours, then put it down and wait for next season. That is, if I hadn't already given up on Splatoon 3, which I'm sure a lot of new players did. Don't get me wrong, the new stuff was cool, but I'm a Splatoon player who likes very specific playstyles and ignores the rest. So most of the updates were pretty hit or miss with me. I know that a lot of people dropped off after the first month because I saw it online, and I know other people felt some of the same things I did because I'm just a casual player, but I'm a casual player that spends a lot of time thinking about Splatoon, even though I hardly play it, because I love everything else about it. Which means that those new or returning casual players with less dedication to Splatoon were way less likely to come back after a few updates. In the seasonal updates, not counting the brand new classes of bow and sword, Splatoon 3 introduced a total of 9 new weapons for existing classes and 4 new specials to Splatoon 3, which is great! That's what we wanted. Brand new content instead of just slightly different old content. Except the new weapons and specials were mixed in quality. I'm not really talking about how well they perform competitively, because every weapon has its fans, and any player can play well with any weapon, especially in a game where inking is just as important as splatting. What I'm referring to is the design. Let's go through the specials first since there are only 4 and we'll go in order.
I'm doing it! I'm doing it! Yeah! Yeah! In some of these, in some of these. Almost there and done. Now let's see how it looks so far.
I think the absolutely worst design special is Kraken, and that's solely because of its invincibility. I do not believe invincibility belongs in PvP multiplayer games unless it takes an appropriate amount of time and or resources. I understand it's a returning special from Splatoon 1, but it should have been changed to no longer be fully invincible. Being completely invincible, players don't really have any other option besides running away. Yeah, you could shoot it to slow it down, but I don't think most weapons can shoot fast enough or have enough range to really risk it, given that it can just charge into you and kill you instantly. It also acts as a panic special that disproportionately rewards the user. If someone gets snuck up on, then they can just pop Kraken where they can no longer die and very easily kill their aggressor. There are many panic specials in Splatoon, but when using all those other specials, the player can still be killed. Just take away the invincibility and give it a lot of health like Booyah. Super Chomp is actually completely inoffensive and is well designed. It's not very powerful, but it's a good displacement special on the level of Rain. A great set it and forget it special for map control. Okay, I have beef with Triple Splashdown. I wasn't going to go into my issues with it because I wanted to be more objective, but the more I thought about it, I do believe that my problems with it are fundamental design issues. Triple Splashdown is a beefed up version of Splashdown for Splatoon 2. It's a very simple concept where your character shoots up in the air, then slams back down with a big one-hit kill AoE. The biggest downside of Splashdown was that there was a short amount of time before your character slammed down where you were vulnerable, so good players would be able to kill you in the air before you can do any damage. Splashdown was bad at higher levels of play, but it was also a noob stomper at low levels. It acted as a panic special for those caught unprepared, but also rewarded the aggressor if they were good enough to splat the splashdown before it finished, so it was all relatively balanced. In Splatoon 3, they upgraded Splashdown to be Triple Splashdown, where instead of just your character slamming down, there are also two giant ink fists on either side of you that also have their own AoE. There are some small size differences, but otherwise the special works the same where you can still be splatted in the air. It's a direct upgrade that makes it much more viable while still retaining that weakness. Except, even if the user gets splatted, the fists will still perform the AoE. To stop the fists, you have to destroy them individually. So to completely stop the special, you need to splat the equivalent of 3 characters before they all slam down. The fists may have less health, but the window to splat before the AoE is so small that it doesn't make a difference. My issue with this, and what I think is bad design, is that the user is nearly always rewarded when using the special, even when they die. Of course, this special can be used for inking means, but it's primarily used for damage. The most likely scenarios are either sneaking up on another player and catching them off guard, or used as a panic special where the user gets snuck up on. This was also how it was most often used in Splatoon 2, but when that happened, the player on the receiving end had the chance to either splat the user or run away fast enough to avoid the AoE. With Triple Splashdown, they can splat the user, but still be splattered by the fists. They can try to run away, but now the AoE zone is much bigger with the 2 side fists. Or they can splat a fist to avoid dying, but then need to fight the user. Splashdown was an iconic special in Splatoon 2. So it's great that they brought it back with more bite, but I think they overcorrected. This is where I remind you I'm speaking from a casual, average player perspective. I don't think Triple Splashdown is overpowered. I just think it feels unfair and therefore not very fun. Splatoon is a very reactive game, so if a player reacts to getting snuck up on by splashdowning and the aggressor reacts by splatting them before it hits, then the aggressor wins the exchange as the better player. If the same situation happens, but the player uses Triple Splashdown, the fists both still come down, probably splatting the aggressor. The aggressor was the better player, but they were still punished while the player who was splatted was rewarded. The difference between this and the other panic specials are, when the user is splatted, the danger is gone. If Nintendo would have just made it to where the fists get destroyed when the user is splatted, I think it would have been a perfect upgrade to such an iconic special without it feeling unfair to play against. I didn't realize I had so much to yap about Triple Splashdown, so let's move on. Luckily, I don't have much to say about the splatter color screen because any player that played against this special when it was new knows the absolutely embarrassing release it had, and for people who don't know, it's easy to explain. The splatter color screen is a huge screen that blocks the view of players. It also has the secondary effect when an enemy touches the screen, it causes their view to become monochrome. This grayscale effect was so saturated on release that it was hard to look at for most players and genuinely painful to look at for others. Basically, Nintendo released the special that screamed, "We didn't do any testing!" and had to update it to adjust the colors and dim the screen during the effect. Besides that nonsense, the screen is It's a big screen that blocks view. But one feature of the screen that is shockingly not a bug is the fact that neither team can see through the screen. That's right, when you use this screen, it blocks your team's view as well. There are these small lines that either team can see through, so it's not a solid wall, but pretty dumb. If you can't see through the screen, then it feels pretty pointless most times, but hey, with only 2 kits per weapon, it's better than nothing. Okay, let's move on to the weapons.
Could I borrow a couple of these?
Again, I'm not going to focus on how good these weapons are. As I mentioned before, that doesn't really matter in a game like Splatoon, as every weapon can be viable in the right hands in casual play. No, what I want to focus on is their designs and why I think most of them are just pretty lame conceptually. The Big Swig roller is a perfect example of what I mean. Before Swig, we had 4 roller types: Carbon, Default, Dynamo, and Flingza. Short, mid, long, and gimmick. The Big Swig's design is that it's fast like the Carbon, but it inks a lot like the Dynamo. To make up for this, it's even weaker than the Carbon and can't one-shot. So it's just a combination between 2 already existing rollers. Like I said, plenty of players can find the fun in this weapon, but it's not very exciting, so let's move on. The Snipe Rider is certainly strange. It's a charger with the standard range of the default charger, but it has to hit a player twice to splat them with a short charge time like the Bamboozler. Its extra feature is that it can store up to 5 shots to shoot one after another. Alright, definitely an interesting concept, probably one of the more unique weapons introduced, but you could argue it's just a combination of bamboo and charger. The Splattershot Nova is just a long-range arrow spray. The Paintbrush is the long-awaited long-range option for brushes, so no complaints here. The S-Blast is a blaster that can change the range of its shot by jumping. I'm not really sure how to feel about the S-Blast under these terms, because on one hand you could say it's literally a cross between 2 existing weapons because it can be short and long-ranged, but on the other hand it's built around that gimmick and has a high skill floor because of it. I think this design just makes me frustrated because there are already a lot of blaster types, so it feels unnecessary as someone who doesn't play blasters, but that's 100% because not all weapon types get so many options. It's perfectly fine. The Dread Ringer is pretty cool. Nothing bad to say, because I'd argue it's actually the true heavy bucket, whereas the Explasher is more of a gimmick weapon that happens to be heavy. It is strange that the single bucket is default, double is heavy, and the tri is light, but not an actual problem. Thumbs up. I actually completely forgot the heavy edit Splatling existed when writing this. It's just so similar to the regular Splatling, I genuinely do not get why this exists. The Splatling class is strange because it has the usual light, mid, and heavy versions, but then its 2 outlier weapons are just ever so slightly different than the default. I don't know why they have such trouble coming up with unique concepts for a minigun. It's whatever. Like blasters, dualies get more versions than other types. But unlike the S-Blaster, I think the Dowser dualies are just so lame. It's not a combination like the Swig and Snipe Rider, but it is just a long-range version of the dualies like the Nova. Except the Dowser's design is especially weak because we already have long-range dualies? Like, what are we doing here? The Squelchers were already on thin ice for me because I believe having long-range dualies goes against the dualies' design philosophy of being these short-range, fast dodge roll weapons that are super aggressive. But now we have dualies that are just even longer range than the already existing long-range dualies? Again, plenty of players have fun with these as they would any new weapon, but I think they have just such a lazy design. And finally, the Recycled Brella, the long-awaited gimmick slot of the Brellas. I think out of all the new weapons of existing types, this one does have the best concept on paper. You're meant to shoot out your shield as much as possible as it's very weak and regenerates fast. It also has the unique small spread, powerful shots. It's very cool, but in practice, it's very hard to use. This on its own isn't a problem as there are plenty high skill floor weapons, but the real problem is that it's not very fun to use. I think this is because the intended gameplay of constantly shooting off your shields doesn't really mesh with Splatoon's fast-paced gameplay. The reason the other Brellas work is because their shields are actually strong enough to slow down other players, while the undercover Brella shoots fast enough to keep up. I'm not sure what you could increase or decrease enough without fundamentally changing the Recycled Brella, but I think the general consensus is that most people just found it awkward to use. Nintendo added quite a few brand new weapons for Splatoon 3, but as you can see, I found many of them underwhelming. I know there are plenty of fans for all these weapons, and I'm glad we have them, but their lackluster designs stand out to me because other existing weapons lacked more kits. You see, to me, with Splatoon 3 starting with one kit each, and with so many weapons added with similar designs to already existing ones, it ended up feeling like they were just adding new weapons rather than adding new kits. If they would have just started with multiple options for each weapon, I wouldn't have felt so bitter about them adding the slightly different stats Splatling instead of a new kit for my favorite weapons, you know? Of course, with these updates, we would also receive new maps and gear, but I believe that with each new season, most players were looking forward to the new weapons and kits. Maps are a close second, but just adding any other options besides all the complete stinkers we got on launch is a net positive. The gear is whatever, but I do want to point out that they did start including duplicate gear in the seasonal battle passes. I'm not even going to bother looking up when this started because including duplicates in your only once per 3 months FOMO battle pass is downright lazy and further discourages players from even bothering to complete it. It doesn't sound too bad until you count the seasons and realize there are only a total of 8 battle passes. We can only assume Nintendo did this because a lot of people weren't getting through their seasonal passes, so they wanted to give those players another chance. But if you would have just made it to where the passes were permanent and we could just work through them at our own pace, then you wouldn't have felt the need to waste space with repeat rewards. I don't even know if you can get past Battle Pass gear, but if you want any of those banners, titles, or victory poses, then play the in-game gacha. The strangest element to these decisions is they feel like predatory mobile gacha game mechanics. You know, it's like those games with impossibly long grinds so you can just pay to get through the battle pass faster, or games with FOMO items from that one event you can't get anymore unless you pay for them. Splatoon is supposed to be this casual, fast-paced, quickly in and out multiplayer game with an already incredibly fun gameplay loop. So why did Nintendo feel the need to add these keep you around as long as possible features? Splatoon does have amazing gameplay, but reward systems like this just train players to constantly be looking forward to the next prize, so when they run out, or feel like those rewards are out of reach, they tend to just leave. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I think these huge grinds really backfired and scared away a lot of new players. So, I've spent a lot of time going into detail about the two biggest failures of Splatoon 3. The maps, and the updates. These were both huge concerns on their own, but I hope you've got a good idea of how these two fundamental parts of the game weave through each other to create the overall fun of Splatoon. If you have big varied maps, then what weapon you use doesn't matter as much. If you have a lot of options for weapons, then you can deal with some bad maps. But if you have both bad maps and limited weapon options, then the negative effects from each just magnify each other to create a pretty meh gameplay loop at best and a downright frustrating one at worst. Now, if you're a Splatoon player, you've probably at some point during this video thought about how good a state Splatoon 3 ended in. Hell, you might even be of the opinion that by the end of year 1, all of my complaints here were no longer problems. This may be true, and I agree that Splatoon 3 in its current state is undeniably an overall fantastic game. But, and this is very important, first impressions are everything. Especially in today's bloated game market for a multiplayer live service game like Splatoon. Why? Because there are hundreds of other games any player can go play instead. For brand new players, their first impression is literally their first introduction to what a game is. What it looks like, what it sounds like, what it plays like, what it feels like. If a new player doesn't like that feel, then they'll just leave and probably never come back. If they did like it, then there's a decent chance they ran out of things they wanted to do, or just ran out of steam with the current content and put down the game to wait for the next seasonal update. There's always the chance that they become a die-hard Splatoon fan and go on to complete the Battle Pass and grind ranked, Salmon Run, whatever, but the truth is, with any multiplayer PvP game, the majority of players are going to be casual ones, whether they're a student with school and extracurriculars or an adult with a full-time job and responsibilities. They're not going to have endless free time. But when they do get that chance to sit back and have fun with video games, they have virtually endless possibilities in today's gaming sphere. Splatoon 3 was already at a huge disadvantage because it's only on the Switch and it does not have the same brand power as the other Nintendo multiplayers like Mario Kart and Smash. At least in the West. But that's exactly why I'm so upset about this whole situation. Even with those disadvantages, Splatoon 3 was incredibly set up to succeed. From the very beginning, the Switch had Splatoon 2. Those who didn't play Splatoon 1, but were hyped for the Switch, probably gave it a go at some point. Then Splatoon 2 slowly grew its reputation with the install base until there was the boom of Octo expansion, which brought a slew of new players. It may never have reached the highs of the other established Nintendo multiplayers, but it continued to be a common install on the Switch until the end of its support. The Switch kept thriving until the unthinkable happened. Splatoon 3 announced. On the same console. This is it! This is Splatoon's chance to finally gain its deserved fame in the West. Splatoon 2 laid the groundwork on the most popular console of this generation. Everyone has a Switch. Everyone at least knows what Splatoon is now, even if they haven't played it. A brand new game is the entryway for new players. It gets tons of build up. There's a test fest to let people try it out for free. It has everything going for it. It finally releases and... it launched in such a lackluster state, players referred to it as Splatoon 2.5. Dedicated casuals like me fell off after the first month, but came back for the updates and fests. But new players who weren't completely hooked just move on to different games. I'm not even trying to imply that Splatoon 3 is a game that you need to get hooked on to keep coming back to, but it had such anti-casual features and mechanics that a lot of those casual gamers just won't bother unless they become completely dedicated. I obviously have a lot more to talk about, but I want this to act as a checkpoint. If there is anything you take away from this video, I want it to be this. The maps and weapons are the fundamental cores that Splatoon gameplay is built on top of. We just went over why both of these elements were extremely limited in Splatoon 3's launch, and when these cores are limited, gameplay is limited. And when gameplay is limited, the fun is limited. Splatoon 2 ran so Splatoon 3 could sprint, but instead, Nintendo tripped it at the starting line. The game did slowly improve itself, and it even had its own boom in the form of side order, but it was too little too late. As I said, first impressions are everything. If you come back to a game after a long time, you're going to think of it as it was, not as it is now. I know how strong this effect is because even as someone who came back for all the fests and follows Splatoon news and watched videos about the updates, whenever I think about playing Splatoon 3, I still remember it as it was when it launched. I remember how unfun the maps were and how I didn't have a weapon kit I liked. It didn't help that it increasingly felt like Nintendo barely cared about the seasonal updates as they went on. Sometimes there was a full-blown trailer, and then other times it was just a Twitter post, and I've already gone over the random quality of content. I didn't even mention the incredibly common connection issues during early Splatoon 3, but that's more of a Nintendo Online issue than Splatoon, although it definitely contributed to driving players away. All of these issues combined created a very disappointing experience for the launch of Splatoon 3, with decisions that haunted it throughout the rest of its life. The hype of its launch passed, and many players moved on. Alright. Thoroughly dissecting the two biggest issues with early Splatoon 3 was my main goal of this video. So why is there so much left? Well, as I said way back at the beginning, I wanted to get the most important topics out of the way first, but I still have plenty of problems I want to yap about, and I'd rather have one big video than several small ones. The remaining sections continue to contain points I believe to be problems with the game, but they vary greatly in their importance. With this in mind, what's next? I already talked extensively about the PvP gameplay, so we'll start with the other two specialties of the Splatoon series, Salmon Run and Splatfests.
Just once! Please, oh please let me win one time!
Squid, I think you have a problem.
No, he doesn't!
Salmon Run was introduced as the dedicated PvE mode in Splatoon 2, and in 3, they improved on it in every way. Except they added a huge grind. But this time the problem isn't necessarily the grind, but the RNG. Remember all the problems I said about the Battlepass grind for PvP? Well, take that, but instead of a linear reward path, it's RNG dependent and the odds are not on your side. Quickly, for those who don't know, to get the rewards for Salmon Run, you have to pay scales, and to get scales, you have to at least get to the boss stage. To get to the boss stage, you have to fill up, or at least almost fill up the boss gauge, and then successfully beat Wave 3 of a run. Even if you don't beat the boss, you'll still get some scales, but you'll get more if you do beat them. There are bronze, silver, and gold scales, and the RNG is weighted heavily towards you getting bronze scales. Of course, some rewards need silver or gold scales only, and like any good mobile gacha game trying to squeeze out as much money from you as possible, you cannot trade up the scales. Now I know what you're thinking, wait a minute, Splatoon 3 doesn't have any microtransactions. And to that I say, exactly! So why is it designed like this? To give you an idea of how bad the RNG was, they actually updated the drop rates later in Splatoon 3 to make them not feel as terrible. Again, why did they design Splatoon 3 to be so anti-casual? What do they have to gain from it? It surely just served as a frustration to players who felt like they weren't being fairly rewarded.
Nice job, ma'am. Join the party. But, the baby's gonna have to wait outside.
Why are Splatfests still Turf War only? For you non-Splatoon players, you may already know that you have to play Turf War to participate in the Splatfest, and winning those turf games is how you win points for your team. But did you know that during Splatfest, no one can play any other PvP game mode? It's not, oh, if you don't play Turf War, you're not participating in the Splatfest. No, any other PvP game mode besides Turf War is completely unavailable for the duration of Splatfest, which are played over an entire weekend. This means if you don't want to play Turf War, you'll just have to wait until the Splatfest is over. This is how it was in Splat 1 and 2, but I think I can say that most of us believed that they would finally do away with this insane restriction for Splatoon 3. Like, I am of the opinion that they should allow all PvP game modes to be a part of Splatfest, but the fact that you can't even choose to not participate in the fest is ridiculous. Speaking of Turf War, anyone else think that it felt worse than ever in Splatoon 3? That was rhetorical. We all felt it, even if you didn't realize it. I bet you got more frustrated playing Turf War in Splatoon 3 than you ever did in Splatoon 2. Turf War was always a contentious mode for multiple reasons, but for most players, the issues usually boil down to how easy it is to turn the tides of the match. Since the objective is to ink as much ground as possible, progress can be lost as easily as it's gained. So it's common to be dominating the other team for most of the game, only to wipe at the last minute and lose because the enemy was able to take enough turf back. It's frustrating, but natural for this kind of casual mode. But did any of y'all feel like this happened way more in Splatoon 3? I fully believe that those early tiny maps made Turf War infinitely worse. I didn't play Splatoon 1, but in Splatoon 2 there were tons of huge varied maps as I showed earlier, so because you had so much to work with on your side of the map, it was fully possible for you to get the win by being thorough enough with inking your base, even if the enemy keeps splatting your team. Splatoon 2's fest gimmick, the shifty stations, even played into this by being even bigger than usual maps with stage gimmicks to change up the gameplay. Because of this, it felt like you had the option of two main game plans of either focusing on inking as much ground as possible, or splatting the other team to stop them from inking. But as I described earlier, because of the tiny maps, it feels like your only option is to try to splat the enemy team to stop them from inking because there's not enough ground to work with. Sure, Splatfests aren't that serious. You're playing to win, but all you win is a few more of these snails which everyone gets in the end. But it sucks to feel like the whole game is decided in the last 30 seconds. All this is to say that Turf War felt awful in early Splatoon 3 and made Splatfest less fun overall.
Yay! Squidward's on my side!
I most certainly am not.
Then that means he's on my side!
No, SpongeBob, I'm not on your side either.
I'm not going to talk about that one launch problem with Tri where only the halftime winners defended and the losers only attacked, because that was obviously going to be a problem and Nintendo fixed it pretty fast. Oh yeah, there was also that one issue where you could only get Tricolor randomly when queuing for regular matches. It was also like this in Splatoon 2, but that worked because the shifty stations were maps. Tricolor is a whole different game mode, so that was a strange decision, but they also fixed that early too by making it its own queue. Though I must admit, I wish they would have kept the separated queues but given a toggle to queue into it randomly, just so I didn't have to choose one or the other. I don't really know what the general consensus for Tri ended up being once they buffed out all the kinks at the beginning. I don't really like Tri. I played some with each Splatfest only because I knew they were only available during Splatfest, so I figured I would give each new map a try. I really don't like how chaotic it is, and it also exemplifies the fighting over inking gameplay of Splatoon 3. I felt like I had to choose a weapon specifically for Tricolor rather than just using what I was using in the regular matches. Obviously, this is just my opinion, and I know a lot of people like how chaotic Tricolor matches are. But if I had any one genuine recommendation, it's to please make it to where the two teams of two cannot splat each other. I know this sounds like it would make it too easy, but hear me out. That would be the only change, as in nothing else would change with how Tri works. So the two teams of two couldn't splat each other, but they still wouldn't be able to use each other's ink and would still need to fight for the most map coverage. The reason I want this change is, if you didn't know, the two attacking teams are supposed to work together. That's how they can beat the full team of 4. Except in my experience, this is not what happened. You see, there's a tiny bit of text at the beginning of the round that's on screen for about 3 seconds telling you this.
Hi, this is Editor Me. I was just completely wrong about this text. I could have sworn it said something along the lines of, work with the other attacking team to defeat the defending team. But even though I was wrong about this, I still believe Nintendo intended the two attacking teams to work together, considering if one attacking team wins, they both win. So the rest of my points still stand here in this section. But I was just completely wrong about this.
But I can guarantee that most casual players don't see this at all. From there, their Splatoon instincts kick in, they see other color, they shoot. If anyone on either attacking team does not try to work with the other attackers, then it's an almost guaranteed loss. Like, I get that it's supposed to be harder for the attackers, but I think they could have gone about it in a less frustrating way. I was tempted to suggest something that just makes the important text harder to miss, but I realized that most people are just mashing the button or looking away until the match starts, so I think it would have been interesting. They couldn't splat each other, but still had to play around each other's ink. But I think the mode was mostly fine on its own. I didn't really like it, but I know other people loved it. Okay, now on to some nitpicks I have about the Splatoon 3 Splatfests. Oh my god, I finally get to shout about what I think is an obvious missing feature of Splatoon 3 Splatfests. Okay, so you know how in both Splatoon 1 and 2, when queuing up for any game, you were just sitting on a loading screen, and how we were all so excited to see Splatoon 3 had this lobby you could play around in while queuing? Even better, it's an in-world training area that Inklings and Octolings would actually play around in waiting for their matches. It's got the training dummies, it's got the customizable lockers, it's got the food, table turf, eventually. It even has this giant TV that plays in-world ads. Wow! Okay, now you know how we've established that Splatfests are extremely important to the Splatoon series, both in-game and for players. And what are the Splatfests all about? Well, trying to win with their team. But the other half is the spectacle. It's night, the idols are live performing on stage, there's lights flashing, confetti is everywhere, and everyone is dancing. Wow, this has got me pumped. I can't wait to start fighting for my team. This has been bothering me since the test fest. Can you explain to me why they put in this absolutely giant TV into the lobby, but it doesn't show the idols' performance during Splatfest? You know, like the other TVs in the hub area do? This seems so obvious. It really sucks to have to go from the huge, exciting festival outside to the same lobby as always. During fests, I love to just sit and watch the idols perform because Splatoon has built such a cool world where almost everything in the game is completely diegetic, but during the Splatfest, I either have to choose between enjoying the fest or participating in the fest, which is why it's so frustrating to see this giant TV not be utilized during the fest. Just have the idols' live feed play on the TV with their fest music blaring. Make it change depending on which hub world you came from, or just let us choose which idols to watch. It's not difficult. This was just one of the biggest missed opportunities in this game, in my opinion. I think you should be able to just queue from anywhere so I could just keep watching the performance until I get a game. Again, this is just a nitpick, but genuinely, why even have these big ass TVs in the lobby if you're not even going to utilize them? Oh, I completely forgot about the little sizzle bombs. What are they called? Whatever. They're fine. I don't have a nitpick on these bombs themselves. They're borderline ignorable and don't really add much to gameplay, but it is something new to Splatfest, so net positive? My nitpick is that they finally added something new to the regular Splatfest mode, and it's just the tiniest crumb you could think of. Gets a big shrug from me. Okay, other nitpicks. Why can we still not dance or cheer during fests? They did end up adding this feature to the Grand Fest, which was at the end of the game, so I can only hope this is available during normal fests and future games. Finally, I think Deep Cut is too high up. It's hard to get a look at them. Why are they so high up? Okay, that's all I have on the Splatfest, so let's move on.
Anchovies.
What?
Anchovies!
Side Order was great. A little undercooked, but no one expected to get a continuation of the Octo expansion, so that was a nice surprise. I played until I got all the rewards, and then never again, but I had a good time while playing. I have one genuine point of criticism, and another point of criticism that's more on the side of a nitpick.
First, the real criticism. Why can you just not access the first half of the final boss fight at all? You can neither play that part nor watch the cutscene again, which is really weird considering you can watch most of the other cutscenes. You don't get the cutscene after saving Marina, which does suck, but this is literally half of the final fight. I don't know who or what determined which cutscenes we get to see again or not. Pretty shitty.
Second, the personal problem I have was the ending climax. Why was it the exact same as the Octo expansion, just worse? This was so surprising and strange to me. At the end of Octo expansion, you are literally buying time for Pearl to charge up her attack, and your reward is her performing this kick-ass booyah to do a laser battle with the final boss where she wins and you beat the game. Hooray! In Side Order, we get the beat build-up, which is cool, and Marina and Octo are coming to DJ, hell yeah. Here we go, we're all feeling the rhythm, and then Pearl does another booyah, but this time it does nothing. She just seems to do it because that's what happened in Octo expansion. The final battle continues as normal. I just don't understand why bother adding it if it doesn't do anything plot or gameplay wise. It's great. I've just been very confused about that element of the ending since I saw it. Overall, Side Order was a fun Splatoon roguelike experiment. It had a great foundation and could easily have been its own spin-off with more content.
What's the big deal? It's only garbage.
Garbage? But Squidward, in the right hands, this paper is a gold mine of entertainment.
I was going to leave this category for the end, but I thought I should instead end with something more important, so here's a lightning round of general nitpicks. 1. Why is there still only 2 maps per rotation? I thought for sure with how hard they were leaning into the 3 options gimmick, they were finally going to give us the fabled 3 maps per rotation. With only 2, it's so much more likely you'll get the same map twice or more in a row. 3 would have been the sweet spot for avoiding getting the same map twice, while maintaining Splatoon's preferred limited options per rotation. And a Splatoon 3, huge missed opportunity. 2. No hairstyles after launch? I know they added a good amount of hairstyles in just base Splatoon 3, but I feel like this is another huge missed opportunity because they leaned a lot more into customizing your Squid or Octo in this game, with being able to choose your eyes and eyebrows. Not to mention that the Octos have way less hairstyles, and the new ones we did get are just the same ones we already had, but a little different. Seriously, look at this. I'd argue that the only wholly new ones are the sushi looking one and the Splatlands one. I just don't get why they didn't add any more hairstyles when we know they have a ton of ideas from the art books. Especially when the post customization we did get was being able to turn your hat backwards and changing glasses position and lengthening your shirt. Sure, it's fun to have these options, but pretty underwhelming. 3. Deep Cut was so sidelined in their own game, it's such a shame. Yeah, they were bosses of the story mode, but they weren't even the main villains. That could have been fine, except we barely saw them throughout the whole story. We got introductions at the beginning, saw one every so often when we fought them, and then they were there at the end. Marina and Pearl weren't even in their story mode, but they got a whole DLC dedicated to them in their stories. Octo expansion made them way more popular because we actually got to know them, and this is definitely why they got a continuation story in form of Side Order. We knew they were getting another DLC for Splatoon 3, but a lot of us were hoping that DC would get something as well, but they never did. And while a lot of players still love them, I hope they get their own time to shine in the future. I was going to say I can't believe they charge for different hub areas, but in retrospect, yes I can. It's just really shitty. We know with the Grand Fest, Splatoon 3's finale ended up being a grand celebration of everything Splatoon has given us since Splatoon 1. So with that in mind, the hub should have been free. DLC that provides a whole new gaming experience like Octo Expansion and Side Order should be paid, sure, but just the hub areas? No need to be that greedy. Like, imagine if you're a new player in Splatoon 3 and don't really want to play for the Splatoon 1 plaza, then Side Order comes around and that player didn't play Splatoon 2 or Octo Expansion, so they have no interest in the continued story or Off the Hook, and they don't really care for roguelikes, so they skip that one too. Then Grandfest comes around and who are these people? Well, they probably know who they are, but they also probably don't care about them. I don't know, you could argue that seeing them perform at Grandfest would make a new player care about the other idols, but either way, just greedy behavior overall from Nintendo. Okay, this one is just lazy. Did you know that really cool fist bump feature they added to visually show players if 2 people on the winning team got 3 gold medals does not work if you have incompatible victory poses? Yeah, here's the chart. Nintendo didn't even bother making animations for every possible pose combination. And you may say, but there are like 50 poses, that would be a ton of work to make animations for all the combinations. And to that I say, a ton of work for Nintendo? The giant billion-dollar gaming company? Don't defend them. They half-assed this feature and then added it in, assuming most players wouldn't notice, because as far as I know, the game doesn't tell you. This doesn't directly affect the game. It is a nitpick after all. I think it's just a good example of how lazy Nintendo could be with Splatoon 3. Alright, enough of that. Let's talk about the Grand Fest, baby! Yeah! The Grand Fest was hands down the coolest in-game shared event I have ever experienced. The very concept of the Splatfests have always been just so cool and fun, and even though we're on game 3, there's still a really novel concept that makes you want to jump in game and just vibe out, you know? So imagine everyone's excitement when they announced that the last fest of Splatoon 3 would not just be the final fest of the game, but a grand festival in a completely new area with all 3 idol groups. Oh man, everyone was pumped. We logged on as soon as it started and it's everything we imagined. It's set up like a real-life music festival with different stages, merch and food stalls, and everyone has glow sticks. All the important side characters are here and all the idols are singing their best tracks, and oh my god, they're all singing the concert versions? I'd get anything to go to a real-life Splatoon concert, and I've watched the concert videos so many times, so as soon as they started singing, I knew immediately that it was the concert versions. God, this is all so cool. Okay, I've spent an hour just running around and watching the performances, so let's actually start I know I've already talked about this huge missed opportunity, but man, did it feel 10 times worse during Grand Fest. Regular fests happened often enough, and besides some small changes for the special fests, they were mostly all the same. But this is the Grand Fest, man! At the time, it was a once-in-a-lifetime event both in-game and out, and they really hyped it up to feel that way. So when this grand live event with a time limit is going, I want to spend as much time as possible just in it. But I've complained about this enough that I think you get how much it upsets me by now, and I hope you feel the same. So, what do I believe to be the worst problem of the Splatoon 3 Grand Fest? It's actually something that's been a problem for every single Splatfest since Splatoon 3 launched. I purposefully did not talk about it in the Fest section because the problem was at its worst during the Grand Fest. Mirror matches. With Splatoon 3 came 3 idols and 3 Splatfest choices. This was pretty exciting as we've only ever had 2 choices, so this gave a baseline of variety. This, in theory, made it a lot less clear who would win the popular vote. If you didn't know, the team that ultimately wins isn't just based on who got the most votes, but also how well they did in battles. I said in theory because many of the Fest choices were questionable, and even though there were more choices, I feel like more often than not, we could pretty easily tell which team was the most popular. This led to mirror matches being way more prevalent in Splatoon 3. You non-Splatoon players may think, wait, why are mirror matches even allowed? What's the point? And you'd be right. They're pointless. But you may also be thinking, you just said that popular vote isn't the only factor to winning, so what's the big deal? And for that, I must reiterate, they're pointless. As in, literally. As in, playing a mirror match does not give you or your team anything. Your team gets points from battling by beating other teams. But when you play on your own team, you get nothing but a wasted 3 minutes. Sure, Splatoon 3 is just fun to play, so it's fun to play a match, but it's a multiplayer PvP and I'm playing to win. So we've established that mirror matches aren't just literally pointless, but can also be frustrating because it's just wasting the player's time. True strawmans may remember back when I said there are no real stakes in winning the fest besides getting a few more snails, so it shouldn't matter. But I left out one very important exception: the final fests. The final fests have huge stakes because every final fest we've had has directly affected the next mainline Splatoon game. We, as players, are competing to influence the next game. We don't exactly know what our choice will change, but it's been pretty significant with each game. Splatoon 1's final fest determined the story of Splatoon 2. Splatoon 2's Final Fest determined the location of Splatoon 3. I know there's only been the 2 games with this effect so far, but with each Final Fest, the change to the game grew bigger, so it's reasonable to think that the winning team of Splatoon 3 will go on to change Splatoon 4 even more. Not only that, but the teams were very grandiose with the ideas of past, present, and future, obviously representing Splatoon 1, 2, and 3. With each idol group representing their game, so it felt like we were fighting for something really important for what Splatoon 4 will be. I'm really trying to emphasize how big the Grand Fest felt, not just for the amazing experience, but for the significance of the outcome. So you can probably imagine at this point just how shitty it felt to constantly get mirror matches. Me and my partner chose Team Present because Splatoon 2 was our gateway into Splatoon, and everyone knew it was the most popular choice. That's fine. But I should not be punished for playing on the most popular team. I don't have footage, but I think any of my other present peeps remember just how often we got mirror matches. It got so bad that we started leaving to the home screen so that the match would get cancelled because we'd rather take the few minutes ban than playing the pointless match. I saw multiple streamers and YouTubers purposefully choose the less popular choice because they wanted to avoid mirror matches. This wasn't just a thing in regular matches either, it carried over to Tricolor. It was really bad and it soured our experience in an otherwise phenomenal event. The worst part is that it's such an easily avoidable situation. Literally, just don't let mirror matches happen, or just let the player toggle whether or not they'll allow mirror matches, or just any other basic solution. This was a problem since the first fest, and they never did anything about it. Oh no, wait, excuse me, they did do something. They made it to where if you win a mirror match, you get extra shells. Sometimes. Truly pathetic behavior from Nintendo. It's such a simple problem that did not need to exist, and it affected a lot of people during the Grand Fest and past fests. Towards the end of the second day, I started to regret choosing Team Present, which is just shitty that I ended up feeling that way. Regardless, the giant 7 idol performance was incredible to see, and the special Tricolor stage with the idols coming to cheer you on was so fun to see, it really made you want to win. I do have to mention that I find it weird Deep Cut were the only ones to get an original cheering song. The Squid Sisters and Off the Hook just got remix versions of their most iconic songs. Very strange. Anyway, the Grand Fest slapped and passed 1, so I wonder how that will affect Splatoon 4. Before we get to the conclusion, let's quickly go over the newest Splatoon announcements since they're relevant.
3 years later.
First off, we have, oh, well. If it isn't the third kits of Splatoon 3, it only took 8 months after the game officially ended. I want to be clear that I think this is obviously a good thing, and it's obvious they added third kits to extend Splatoon 3's life, which I think is also a good thing. I think it's still too early for Splatoon 4, and adding new weapons or kits is the best way to excite players for the least amount of effort, but I think I've made it quite clear that I believe third kits should have been in the base game. I'm happy they finally did add third kits, better late than never after all. But, what's that? Not every weapon got a third kit?
Rage, fury, irritation, humiliation.
By the end of Splatoon 3, there were 63 main weapons. 30 of those weapons received third kits. That's less than half. I don't need to explain how ridiculous this is. Will they release more? Probably. I assume they aren't planning for Splatoon 4 for a while, and like I said, kits are the easiest way to add content to Splatoon 3, but what can I say at this point? Sorry to all those whose favorite weapon didn't get a third kit. Maybe next update. Next we have Splatoon Raiders, the first Splatoon spin-off game. I don't have much to say about the game itself, but hey, this addresses one of my problems because this game stars Deep Cut in a separate game on the Switch too. Look, at this time of writing, we don't know if it'll be a Switch 2 exclusive, and we don't know its price, and while I'm shaky on the exclusive part, we can be pretty confident that it will be full price, which in a vacuum isn't terrible, but in reference to more content including Deep Cut, it's not great needing to buy a whole other game to learn more about them, even though they were the main idols of Splatoon 3. But hey, I'm super happy they're letting Deep Cut be the main NPCs. Like, not only did they get sidelined in their own game, but they're canonically scavengers, so it's perfect recipe for a spinoff. I'm excited to see what the gameplay will actually be, but if it ends up being a Switch 2 exclusive, I won't be playing it anytime soon. We didn't get a release date though, so maybe by the time it releases, Switch 2 prices would have dropped?
What a baby.
Now, here we are at the end. So, why did I make this video? Well, there are two main reasons. The first is because Nintendo completely fumbled this game. With the huge wave of new fans that Splatoon brought to the series and the insane success of the Switch brought to the Nintendo, Splatoon 3 should have been the tipping point for the Splatoon series to finally bring it into the mainstream multiplayer sphere with Mario Kart and Smash. You know, something that most anyone would just turn on and play. And I'm talking in the West. It's already achieved this status in Japan, but instead, they released it in a bare-bones state which only received content updates every 3 months, added huge grinds to both the PvP and PvE game mode, and generally just kind of forgot about it in between those updates of which Nintendo only sometimes cared about. Speaking of the West, did you notice that Nintendo still barely markets Splatoon in America? I genuinely believe this was one of the biggest reasons as to why Splatoon is not as popular over here. I can't speak for the other Western countries, but seriously, go to your local Walmart, Target, or wherever, and see if you can find any Splatoon merch. You'll see plenty of Mario, Zelda, and maybe even some Animal Crossing. But Splatoon? Fat chance. And I'm not stupid, Splatoon 3 is a huge success. Many people don't play it like they do Smash Brothers, but most of the general audience at least knows about Splatoon 3. I'm upset because the game could have easily been so much more. I often express to my partner that it felt like Splatoon 3 was a testing ground for features and mechanics, and well, that would have been fine if they had just given it a better foundation to stand on. I truly do not know what Nintendo's master plan for Splatoon 3 was. They had some milestones in mind, but most of the time it just felt like they were making it up along the way. The second reason is because I'm just a casual Splatoon player. I'd wager most of you watching consider yourselves one too, but most Splatoon YouTubers are going to be die-hard comp players. There's nothing wrong with that, but after a while it can skew our perspectives on what Splatoon is, and more specifically what Splatoon 3 was. Us casual players are going to experience problems that never affect the pro players and vice versa. A good example would be the maps. Yeah, both pro and casual players dislike the tiny maps, but the pro players who are already very good at the game aren't going to be affected by the increased competitiveness of their design. But for us casuals, it was downright oppressive. I made this video not just to vent my own frustrations with Splatoon 3, but also so I could give a voice to all those casual players who may have not been able to pinpoint why the game just didn't feel great to play. Of course, not all casual players experienced the game like I did, but I know that if I had these problems, so did others. A lot of Splatoon YouTube is focused on high-level gameplay and getting better at the game, but this one goes out to all my casuals who just wanted to play for the fun of it. Hopefully you've realized by now that most of my focus here was mostly on the beginning of Splatoon 3 because its launch is where it got the most attention by the general audience. By the end of Splatoon 3, it was finally able to achieve the greatness we all knew it could. But by that time, a lot of the casual audience had moved on. In retrospect, Splatoon 3's launch date just felt lazy and greedy. Nintendo had the experience and resources to give us what Splatoon 3 ended as, in the beginning. But as the Switch became an overwhelming success, Nintendo began this trend of subtracting existing content to give back to us later, flaunted as an update. But that's a bigger issue. If I could sum up everything I've said here in one line, it's this. I love Splatoon 3, and it deserved better.
Everything down!
Thank you for making it to the end of my very first video. Please like the video if you did, and definitely comment any of your thoughts and feelings about anything I talked about here. One of the main reasons I wanted to make this video was so I could read about all your experiences with Splatoon 3 and how these early problems affected your enjoyment. Subscribe if you want, but this was just a side project for me and I don't plan to make another video anytime soon. I did realize this is a very satisfying way to vent, so I'm sure I'll be making more in the future when it feels necessary, but it could be about anything.
Now, given this is my first video, I don't have any other videos of mine to put here, but I do have 3 videos I highly recommend you check out if you enjoyed this one. First is this video by Captain Astronaut where he goes into much more detail about every update for Splatoon 3. This is the first of 2, so make sure to watch both to get the whole experience, and also check out the rest of his channel. I love him. Second is this video by Scott Falco that he posted about a year after the game launched, which was the first video I watched that made me realize my feelings about Splatoon 3 were not uncommon. Also check out the rest of his channel. I love him. Finally, this last video is an absolutely amazing fan-made music video of 3 Wishes that goes crazy hard with different models, locations, fan lyrics, camera angles, and oh my god, watch this video, and then again. I watched it for the first time late at night and it made me a little emotional. It is incredible. Do yourself a favor and watch it. And that's it. Thanks again for watching and take care of yourself out there.